After 3 years of constantly lagging behind Samsung in terms of zoom, Apple is finally adding a powerful zoom module to the iPhone 15 Pro Max. On top of this, they're also significantly improving their image processing. But is this all enough to beat the S23 Ultra? Well, we have 35 individual tests to find out, from HDR samples to indoor shots to zoom shots at multiple ranges to portrait mode PET, macro, RAW, to basically everything else. And we're also giving away an iPhone 15 Pro as well as an iPhone 15 to celebrate the launch of our new app, Wallpapers. With Wallpapers, we offer beautiful 8K wallpapers handcrafted by our talented designers that we feature and promote on our platform. We also have cross-platform cloud sync between iOS and Android, with new wallpapers packs dropping every Friday starting from October, and so much more. To enter the iPhone 15 Pro giveaway, download Wallpapers and become a subscriber. You do get a 30-day free trial, and then send an email to giveaway@wallpapersapp.com with your username and unique ID, which are found in your account settings right here. And to enter the iPhone 15 giveaway, simply follow Wallpapers app on Instagram and leave a comment on any of the Wallpapers Instagram posts saying what your favorite wallpaper pack is and why you want to win an iPhone 15. The winners for both will be announced on the 21st of October on both Wallpapers and ZONEofTECH social media pages. Okay, starting off with an outdoor HDR shot, the image processing is actually pretty good on both, with slightly more shadow detail on the S23 Ultra. However, once we zoom in, the difference becomes staggering, with the iPhone being significantly more detailed and Samsung just falling apart. This is because despite Samsung having a 200 megapixel sensor, it uses pixel binning to combine 16 pixels into one for better low light performance, and gives you a 12 megapixel image as a result, whereas Apple gives you a 24 megapixel image by default, and therefore we do get more detail. Interesting enough, despite being double in resolution, Apple's file size is actually smaller at 3.2 megs compared to 4.3. In the second HDR shot, with the sun shining straight into the cameras, Samsung did a better job by raising the shadows and preserving much more detail, on top of the green color of the plants, which is entirely gone on the iPhone. Same goes for this third HDR shot, where Samsung seems to process the bright scenes better with more shadow detail. So yeah, I'm glad to see that the iPhone is not blowing out the highlights anymore like it used to, but the shadows still look a bit too dark. When it comes to the indoor shots, in the first one, the iPhone 15 Pro Max performs better. The image is better exposed, with the ceiling looking more natural, Samsung brightened up everything a bit too much, and everything looks overly sharpened, whereas the iPhone has that natural detail still in, mostly thanks to that 24 megapixel photo size as opposed to 12. In our second indoor shot, Samsung's processing is much closer to Apple's here, but again, when we zoom in, the iPhone is considerably more detailed, especially when it comes to the texture in the sofa. And now let's test out the zoom. Starting at 2x, the iPhone 15 Pro Max looks better. This is thanks to the 2x being a sensor crop rather than digital zoom, so we do get more detail and less noise. At 5x is where the 15 Pro Max would be using its native 5x module, whereas the S23 Ultra would be using its 3x module and then zooming in digitally up to 5x. So the iPhone is definitely more detailed if you take a look at the top of the boy here, but Samsung is still doing a surprisingly good job. But going up to 10x, this is where Samsung now starts using its dedicated 10x zoom module, with the iPhone now zooming in digitally on its 5x module. And this is where the S23 Ultra really shines. Not only is the image sharper, but it also has less noise. It is brighter, and it just looks like a photo taken with the main module, whereas the iPhone is starting to look quite muddy. And if we go all the way up to 25x, which is the iPhone's max zoom, we can see how it just cannot hold a candle against the S23 Ultra, which still has significantly more detail. So at lower zoom ranges, up to 5x, the iPhone is better. But if we go to numbers like 10x and above, that's where the S23 Ultra shines, which, by the way, can go up to 100 times max, as opposed to the 25 on the iPhone. Now, if you're planning on getting the 15 Pro Max or the S23 Ultra, you need to make sure that you keep your phone protected from the recent storm of data breaches. And this is where our sponsor, NordVPN, comes in. NordVPN's dark web monitor for data leaks makes sure your information stays safe on all of your devices. You might think your personal information is secure, but unfortunately, that doesn't always mean that websites that use it are always going to be safe from breaches. Any compromised data can now be accessed from the dark web and be used against you, locking you out of Netflix, Facebook, or potentially even making purchases on websites like Amazon. NordVPN's dark web monitor alerts you when your credentials appear on underground hacker websites. Additionally, you can use NordPass, their free password manager, to generate strong passwords too. Go to nordvpn.com/ZOTVPN and get 4 extra months with a massive discount on their 2-year plan. Nord also has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can safely give it a go without any risks. And now, back to the video. Moving on to portrait mode pet, Samsung has been the king for many years, and it seems like it still is, with its impressive ability to separate Ren's individual hairs to perfection. Plus, the details in the sky are also better preserved on the S23 Ultra. However, the iPhone does have a much more gradual blur, which some people might actually prefer. When it comes to portrait mode person, it seems like the iPhone has a slightly better edge separation than the Samsung here, if you take a look at my hair. The iPhone also looks a bit higher res, and I also prefer the brighter image on the iPhone. However, Samsung also did a very good job here. When it comes to portrait mode object, I'm actually very impressed by how well Samsung managed to separate the plants from the background, despite not having a LiDAR module like the iPhone does. When it comes to the ultra-wide module, the viewing angle is very similar on both, with the iPhone being a tiny bit wider. But in terms of the overall quality, I personally prefer the S23 Ultra here, as it's brighter and just looks more pleasing to the eye. However, if we zoom in, we can see that the iPhone did handle the highlights better, as part of the sky got blown out on the Samsung. In this second ultra-wide shot, Samsung is once again a bit better in terms of processing, with more shadow detail, better highlight retention in the sky, and also more vibrant colors, which I personally do prefer. In terms of the indoor ultra-wide, the Samsung raised the shadows a bit too much, and we ended up getting a ton of noise in the ceiling. However, once we zoom in into the dotted pattern in the center, you can see that Samsung's ultra-wide captures noticeably more detail. So in terms of daytime, the ultra-wide is better on the Samsung. Both phones can also do macro, and they're pretty close in terms of the detail, but the iPhone is significantly more vibrant. I personally prefer the iPhone here, but the Samsung was more accurate in terms of how this looked. We then also tested RAW photography. We took this photo in Apple's ProRAW and Samsung's Expert RAW formats in 48 and 50 megapixels in resolution, and I've edited both to see how much more detail I could recover. I was able to raise the shadows quite a bit more on the iPhone, and the iPhone also had more natural detail as opposed to a lot of the sharpening that Samsung apparently added, despite this being a raw image. Now, both the S23 Ultra and the iPhone 15 Pro Max allow you to shoot at full resolution in 200 megapixels on the S23 Ultra and 48 on the iPhone. And looking at both images, I was a bit surprised. The S23 Ultra is more detailed in some parts of the image, like the grass at the front and the bricked road on the left, but in the very center, the iPhone was actually more detailed. My guess is that Apple is simply using a higher quality lens, which could explain why we get a sharper image despite a 4 times lower resolution. I should mention that the iPhone does have an inferior image processing at higher res than Samsung, as the clouds are blown out in a number of areas. Now, on the S23 Ultra, you can also switch to a 50 megapixel mode, which if we compare this side by side against the iPhone's default 24 megapixels, Samsung's image is a bit more detailed, although at the expense of more blown out highlights. And if you compare Apple's 48 megapixel HEIF with Samsung's 50 megapixel JPEG, Samsung is still more detailed, although it has double the file size. So if you're looking to take some super high-res images, Samsung's 50 megapixel mode is really the best for sharpness here, whereas Apple is a bit worse, but it does offer better image processing at 48 megapixels. So what about video? The iPhone has been the king for many years now, and yeah, this doesn't seem to have changed in this test. Although Samsung's footage looks pretty good, the iPhone has considerably more natural detail, whereas Samsung still tends to over-sharpen everything. On top of this, the iPhone also has more natural depth of field if you take a look at the rail here, whereas Samsung seems to lack this entirely. And also, the iPhone now records in 4K 60 while switching between all lenses, whereas with the S23 Ultra, you can only do 4K 30 if you want to switch between your lenses. Now, both phones feature portrait mode video, aka cinematic mode, in 4K 30. And looking at both side by side, the iPhone seems to track me better and keep my face in focus, even when I was walking behind this tree. Although, if we stop this footage here, the Samsung has a sharper image and managed to separate my hair better. So, as long as you're not obstructed by any other objects, the Samsung will do a better job here. When it comes to ultra-wide video, there's an even bigger difference here than with regular video. The iPhone is able to expose HDR scenes like this building against the bright sky almost perfectly, whereas Samsung just crushes the shadows massively here, and a ton of detail is just lost. It seems like the iPhone's ultra-wide video is also a bit wider than Samsung. Both phones also feature action mode, which is this super stable mode for when you're running or doing sports. The iPhone is a bit higher res, 2.8K versus 2K on the Samsung, both being in 60 FPS. The S23 Ultra does seem to be a bit more stable, not by much though, but there was a considerable difference in terms of the quality, with the iPhone looking like a regular video, whereas Samsung kind of looked like 1080p video with added sharpening. Next up, we also did a lens flare test at night, as Apple claims that they have reduced the reflections with a new lens coating. And compared to the S23 Ultra, light rays are less noticeable on the iPhone, especially if you look at that light in the distance, but they're not completely gone, just a bit better. Moving on to actual night mode, in this first shot, they're both very similar, with the S23 Ultra being brighter, sharper, if you take a look at its pink plan right here, but the iPhone does have more textured detail in the brick wall. I do personally prefer the Samsung here, but it is a matter of taste. In the second night mode shot, which had almost no light at all, the iPhone does considerably better, especially if you take a look at a grass, which Samsung just muddies it entirely. The leaves are barely visible at all on the Samsung, whereas on the iPhone, they are perfectly visible. And in this third night mode shot, we're back to an area that had a bit more light, and this time it seems like the iPhone does better, with much more detail, especially in the dark areas on the right. The plants are significantly sharper, and same goes for the detail on the brick wall. So yeah, in terms of night mode, at least with the main module, it seems like the iPhone does do better. If we move on to night mode on telephoto module at 5x, the iPhone also does a bit better, thanks to its larger f2.8 aperture as opposed to the f4.9 on the S23 Ultra. But then when we bump it to 10x, the iPhone still does better, despite Samsung having that dedicated 10x zoom module. And it seems like that's because Samsung just didn't have enough light to use that module, and it automatically switched to the 3x and then zoomed in digitally. So now, when it comes to the night mode with the ultrawide module, the iPhone once again does better, with more detail in the grass, and the brickwork texture on the house is also more detailed, although Samsung's photo was very close. Night mode portrait is a bit of an odd one, as Apple can only take it with the 1x module, whereas Samsung can also use 2x and 3x. However, 1x just looked way too zoomed out, so we've actually used 2x here, and the iPhone did get a more natural look, but blew out the lights on the left. Samsung, however, stylized the entire image and gave me this blue and purple look, which I do really like, but yeah, I actually had no purple and blue light on me. So personally, I do prefer the Samsung here, although the iPhone is a bit more realistic. Now, in terms of night video, this was filmed in almost pitch black, so they're both very, very dim. But the iPhone is able to show more of the plant pots in focus and with less noise too. So the iPhone is better, but Samsung wasn't that far behind here. Now, when it comes to the front-facing camera, the iPhone does do a better job here by being wider, sharper, and also with a better image processing. If you take a look at the clouds, there's better highlight retention on the iPhone. And for some reason, my head had this weird white glow on the Samsung photo. And if we take a look at this extra photo taken in direct sunlight, the iPhone is also able to recover much more of the highlight details. And next up, we have front-facing video, which I'll let you guys watch first. Okay, so this is a front-facing video test between the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. Let me know which one handles the highlights better in the sky, which one has more vibrant colors, which one looks sharper, and then also which one sounds better. Is it the S23 Ultra or the iPhone 15 Pro Max? So the S23 Ultra actually had better image processing here with more highlight detail retention, although I did find it quite dark compared to the much brighter image of the iPhone. However, when it came to the microphone, the iPhone was definitely better. In terms of front portrait mode, I don't know what happened here, but the iPhone completely messed up the background separation by keeping the tree behind me in focus. Samsung figured that out and separated me almost perfectly, although my jacket appeared to be a bit blue, whereas the iPhone definitely had much more natural colors. And then when it came to front-facing night mode, I've just realized that there is a major bug on the iPhone, where the brightness of the front-facing flash is directly influenced by the manual brightness of your display. Obviously, with Samsung, it just maxes it out, which is how it should behave. So this means that I actually had different results depending on what brightness level my iPhone screen was set to. And yeah, I do much prefer Samsung results here. At the end of the day, it is quite difficult picking a clear winner, as they both have their ups and downs. The iPhone did make some good improvements in terms of their HDR processing, with far better highlight retention than before, but Apple's zoom is still lacking behind Samsung's. So if you're looking for some outstanding long-range zoom level, and also some super colorful HDR shots, then definitely go with the S23 Ultra. If you're looking for some good selfies and some outstanding video, then go with the iPhone. If you're looking for more accurate portrait mode shots, then again, go with the Samsung. And if you're looking for some great night shots, go with the iPhone. So yeah, it really depends on what kind of photos you want to take the most. Also, there are a number of other differences that might impact your purchase too, such as Samsung's Pro Mode in the camera app that lets you fully tweak the camera settings, whereas Apple requires you to download a third-party app. Personally, I am quite happy with both. I do wish that the 15 Pro Max had better zoom. At the same time, I also wish that the Samsung would give us 50 megapixels as default. But yeah, let us know what you guys think. Check out wallpapers for some amazing wallpapers for your devices, and stay tuned for more camera comparisons soon. I'm Daniel, this has been ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.